feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Before we get into our second segment of today's show, I do want to remind you as always to consider making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube in order to contribute and interact a little bit more directly with the show if you so choose. You can also do it through our website, gsmcpodcast.net. You can also leave any tips or donations if you so choose as well. There, it is genuinely appreciated by all concerned here in the network. It just makes our shows that much better because of your input. Without further ado, let's jump right into our second wildcard game reaction of today, talking about another NFC North loss in the NFC side of the bracket. The Packers taking on the Eagles. And this game was very much like the Vikings-Rams game, except I feel like the Packers losing might be even more disappointing than the Vikings losing, because remember, the Packers seem to be the team in the NFC North with all the momentum after last season. As the number 7 seed last season, they went into Jerry World, took down the Dallas Cowboys, really obliterated them on the road, then really played a very competitive game against the eventual NFC champion in the San Francisco 49ers on the road as well. A lot of hype before the season was centered around this team and their growth over the last season. But now, this year, they really underwhelmed and went 0-6 against the teams, the top 3 in the NFC rankings, the Vikings, Lions, and Eagles. And so that really shows a steep decline from where the Packers were at the end of last season to where they are now. And there are going to be a lot of questions surrounding this team in the offseason and what went wrong. A lot of people are going to point to the injuries. A lot of people are going to point to perhaps Jordan Love not progressing as a lot of fans and players or staff might have hoped. And others are going to point to, well, maybe they aren't just among the NFC's elite just yet. But either way, this was an embarrassing loss on the road to the Eagles in a game that I feel was there for the taking. Because while the Eagles certainly proved that they're far superior, far more physical team in this one, they didn't blow me away. This was not a performance in which I could seriously say the Eagles truly separated themselves from the Packers enough to call it a comfortable victory. This was a 12-point game, and had Jordan Love had some weapons, played a bit more competently, then this could have been a closer game, and ultimately it was a 22-10 affair, and we're asking a lot of questions with the Packers compared to the Eagles after this one. But let's talk about some stats and the future of both of these teams as Philly prepares for the divisional round matchup and the Packers prepare for a long offseason. Let's talk about Jordan Love's performance. 20 for 33, 212 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 2 sacks. Now, yes, this Philadelphia Eagles defense is the number 1 defense in the NFL. They allow very little, they generate a lot of pressure, and take the ball away at a very high rate. But if you're Jordan Love, you have to play a little bit more competently. And yes, it seems a little bit harsh to criticize someone who, after this game, was down his top 3 receivers in Watson, who did not play at all in this game and was in fact out for the season with a torn ACL, Dobbs and Reed going down throughout the duration of the game. But you do have to look at Jordan Love from where he was last season, confident in this receiving core, confident in being able to distribute the wealth amongst all these talented receivers, to now where with Malik Heath, Bo Melton, and Dontavion Wicks at the helm, guys who have proven they can contribute at a decent level for you, not really trusting them, I feel like, a lot of people are going to say, well, you can't really blame Jordan Love for this loss. But considering the fact that he last season looked so different in the postseason compared to now, really leads itself to concern for a lot of Packers fans and a lot within the organization, because Malik Heath, Bo Melton, and Dontavian Wicks were there last season. Yes, they didn't contribute as much, but they're still integral parts of this multifaceted receiving core. They're still playing meaningful snaps week in, week out. It's just that they don't play as many as, say, a Jaden Reed or a Romeo Doubs. And so to see that decline in Love, whether it be trust issues or just not reading the defenses that well, it's really telling to see this decline from Love. And hopefully he can get back on track, but that says something about his progression over the past 2 seasons. To the point where he's now someone who we're going to be worrying about a lot more rather than lauding over the offseason. And then on the other side of things, Jalen Hurts. Because there was a lot of worry about Jalen Hurts' performance, considering the fact that he's coming off that concussion a couple weeks ago, was still in concussion protocol as soon as, 3-4 days before the game, practice, I believe, the Friday before the game, and really proved that in certain moments when the Eagles needed to pass the football, proved that he could. But it wasn't necessarily a performance you were completely impressed with from a passing perspective. It was 13 of 21, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns, and yes, he looked like, at the very least, he was stable and competent enough to lead the Eagles to victory, but chances are, against teams like the Commanders, Lions, and Rams, their defenses are going to ask a lot more questions of Jalen Hurts. They're going to put a lot of pressure on his shoulder to carry them to victory, whereas Saquon may just be the quote-unquote sacrificial lamb in those situations, right, where he's going to have to really carry the load against the NFC's elite. But Jalen Hurts did prove that he could stand back there and deliver a performance where he's not turning the ball over and he's really controlling the clock, which the Eagles really love to do. And so, along with the defensive game plan, it worked really well. But I do want to see what he can do against a team like the Lions or the Rams in the championship round should they get there, because of how this Eagles offense is set up. Right? They run the football, control the clock, and as a result allow this number 1 scoring defense to wreak havoc. And if they can't get to that against these teams who, with the Lions, can put up a lot of points, with the Rams have proven they can play some of the better complementary football on your side of the bracket, then that becomes a worry. But Jalen Hurts did prove and kind of dispel any notion of the concussion rumors that at the very least he can keep the ball with the Eagles and control the clock. And then, of course, Saquon had a major impact on this game. 25 carries, 119 yards. And in terms of that last play, it was a smart football play, right? Obviously, you might have wanted to make the score look a little bit better for your team, but Saquon did the right thing in taking that slide and ultimately preserving the win. But now let's talk about the most impressive factor of this game. This Philly defense, because it is, I believe, the best remaining defense, not just on the NFC side of the bracket, but perhaps in the entirety of the teams in the playoff field. And so I do feel like when we look at Philly, in moments of offensive stagnation, this defense has proven that it can complement the inefficiencies and bolster the inefficiencies, most importantly, of this offense. Nolan Smith was a star for me, wreaking havoc on Zach Tom, who up to that point had been a stellar offensive lineman for Green Bay with 2 sacks. And then, of course, Zach Bond, one of the best free agent acquisitions by any team this past offseason. Darius Slay, the grizzled veteran who blends aura of of sensibility and experience to this secondary. And then Quinyon Mitchell, the young guy who I really like, all with the interceptions of Jordan Love, and ultimately one of the more comprehensive defensive performances of the weekend until the Rams showed up and put that hammering on Minnesota. It's going to be a really interesting game next week between the Rams and the Eagles, and I'm really excited to see how both of, as Tattler says, Baltimore's equal to the Eagles IMO, but I do think the Eagles have been more consistent throughout the year. I feel like you're right about Baltimore's defense stepping up, but remember, this Baltimore defense wasn't really that fantastic to start the year. They grew into the season, and the Eagles have been doing this all season long. But I do agree that the Baltimore could be right on par with them, but I have to give the edge to the Eagles considering how comprehensive they've been all year round. But I do appreciate that comment. But as we conclude this segment, looking at the future of the Packers, it's certainly a little bit more dire as Tackler also shouts out Cooper DeJean, who we cannot forget in that secondary as well. But concerning the future of the Packers, I feel like it's a little bit more dire compared to last season, right? When there was a lot of hope and optimism surrounding them. This year, I feel like as a team in the very competitive NFC North, all their deficiencies, all their losses to the NFC's elites kind of went a little bit unnoticed. And as a result, people really started to believe that this Packers team was more than the sum of their parts this season. Whereas the reality was they were living under a mirage. Because a lot of people chose this game as a popular upset pick. A lot of people thought the Packers had enough offensively to overwhelm this stellar Eagles defense. But that was not the case. And quite frankly, a lot more people should have seen this coming. And it's going to be a very long offseason where the Green Bay Packers could be thinking about what could have been this season compared to where they were last season. So I'm not necessarily certain the Green Bay Packers are going to consistently make the playoffs in the Jordan Love era that consistently anymore. And I'm really intrigued to see how they try and make adjustments to this team when everything seemingly went wrong at the absolute worst time for them. But congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles, and hopefully that game between the Rams and the Eagles is going to be more popcorn worthy than this encounter, because this was a beatdown. Let me know what you continue to think about this game in the comments, because coming next we transition to the world of MLB, talking some popular hot stove rumors, what's up with Pete Alonso and Alex Bregman, and what business do the Dodgers and Yankees still have to do to ensure their supremacy in their respective leagues. So we'll be right back to talk about that right after this short break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily